there. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the S. Walden Miller Black Luminaries in Neuropsychology series. I am Dr. Kendra Anderson, the Secretary for SVN, and we would like to thank you so much for joining us today. For all of those who may be battling the effects of this winter storm out there, I know personally I'm from Texas, or I live in Texas, and I've been dealing with that. So if you are in Texas and joining us, or anyone who's been impacted by the winter storm, thank you so much for being here, and our thoughts are with you. So if this is your first time joining us, just a reminder, this series was created with the primary goal of illuminating the stories of Black innovators in neuropsychology. This is our fourth interview of the series, and we've been quite fortunate to have some of the most dynamic leaders in our field to join us and give us an in-depth look at their career journey. And thus far, we've already sat down with Dr. Mark Norman, the Executive Director of INS, Dr. Anthony Stringer, the first African-American to be board certified, as well as Dr. Natalie Kelly. They've all given us such a wonderful perspective and such pearls of wisdom, and so we are deeply grateful for their time. Check out our YouTube page if you didn't have the opportunity to catch those interviews, in case you missed them. And we still have a wonderful lineup of leaders to interview. So, typically before we get into our interview for today, we highlight an ancestor. And today, I think it's very fitting to highlight Dr. Solomon Carter Fuller in our Ancestor Spotlight today. So Dr. Fuller, an early 20th century psychiatrist, researcher, medical educator, was born on August 11, 1872 in Monrovia, Liberia. His parents, Solomon C. and Anna Ursula Fuller, were Americo-Liberians. Solomon Carter Fuller, was the first African-American psychiatrist. He also performed considerable research concerning degenerative diseases of the brain. In 1889, Solomon migrated to the United States to attend Livingstone College in Salisbury, North Carolina. He then attended Long Island College Medical School and completed his medical degree at Boston University School of Medicine in 1897. Fuller completed an internship at Westboro State Hospital in Boston and stayed on as a pathologist. He eventually became a faculty member of the Boston University School of Medicine. Solomon Fuller's major contribution to the growing clinical knowledge was his contribution to the growing clinical knowledge of Alzheimer's disease. As part of his postgraduate studies at the University of Munich in Germany, Fuller researched pathology and specifically neuropathology. In 1903, he was one of the 5 foreign students chosen by Dr. Alzheimer to do research at the Royal Psychiatric Hospital at the University of Munich. He also helped correctly diagnose and train others to correctly diagnose the side effects of syphilis to prevent Black war veterans from getting misdiagnosed, discharged, and ineligible for military benefits. He trained these young doctors at the Veterans Hospital in Tuskegee, Alabama, before the infamous Tuskegee syphilis experiments. Through much of his early professional career, Dr. Fuller was employed with Boston University School of Medicine, where the highest position he attained was associate professor. Dr. Fuller died of diabetes in 1953 in Framingham, Massachusetts. In 1974, the Black Psychiatrists of America created the Solomon Carter Fuller Program for young Black aspiring psychiatrists to complete their residency. Please join me in honoring Dr. Solomon Carter Fuller. All right. Well, I think honoring Dr. Fuller is a great segue into introducing our esteemed interviewee for today. Dr. Jennifer Manley is a professor of neuropsychology and neurology at the Taub Institute for Research in Alzheimer's Disease and the Aging Brain at Columbia University. Her research focuses on mechanisms of disparities in cognitive aging in Alzheimer's disease. In order to do this research, her research team has partnered with Black and Latinx communities around CUIMC and around the country to design and carry out investigations of social factors across the life course, such as educational opportunities, racism and discrimination, and socioeconomic status, and how these factors relate to cognition and brain health later in life. She served on the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Advisory Council on Alzheimer's research, care and services from 2011 to 2015, and is a member of the National Advisory Council on Aging and also an advisor on the advisory board of SPN. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Jennifer Manley. Dr. Manley, so great to see you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, I, like anyone, when I hear of your work and I hear of you, I get so excited because of your amazing contributions that not only to the field of neuropsychology, but our understanding of Alzheimer's disease in, underserved communities. But, one thing I really don't know is about kind of the start of your journey. So can you tell us a little bit about, where you grew up and, how that continues to influence you today?
Sure. Well, I grew up all over the place. My my dad was a pilot in the Air Force. He was a test pilot. So yeah, we moved about every 2 years. I was born in Ohio, and my little brother, who's about a year and a half younger than me, was born in Northern California. We were stationed in Albuquerque, New Mexico for a little while, and then I did a lot of formative years, sort of my kindergarten through 5th grade, in the Mojave Desert. The Mojave Desert in Edwards Air Force Base, where a lot of test pilots are stationed at one time or another, because there's a lot of dry lake beds there and the plains land there. So the desert is really, when I go back there, I've been living in New York for more than 20 years now. When I go back to the desert, I'm like, okay, this is my home.
Mm-hmm.
It feels familiar, which is so weird, but yeah, my parents don't live there anymore because my dad, retired and so on. But yeah, that was where I grew up. I ended up, my dad got stationed at Andrews Air Force Base.
Okay.
During my high school years, and that is, sort of, in Maryland, just outside of DC, where I went to high school. And so I got to be in a slightly bigger city, I guess, during my high school years. Yeah. And that was where, I think I got exposed to people whose backgrounds were really vastly different than mine. And I started to get much more interested in social justice issues at that age. And knowing that my experience really was really different from a lot of folks. I went to college at Berkeley and then stayed in California for my grad school training.
Wow. So you're really from everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But you identify kind of, Arizona, the desert, and that place as your home. You mentioned how you really got interested in social justice early on, as early as junior high school. Is there something that, like a particular event or something in particular, that really raised your consciousness and your interest in social justice?
I remember it being, it's funny that you mentioned that, because given all the technology that we have now, I feel so old saying this, but when I was in high school, the newest technology, in a way, were these word processors. And they were like fancy typewriters that had just a little tiny bit of memory. And so you could go, you could see on the thin little strip of a screen what you had written, and it would, and you could go back and correct just that little bit. So yeah, there I got exposed through my love of music, and at the time it was, sort of DC punk music. Sorry, this is getting way too. This is weird.
DC punk music.
DC punk music, and there were a lot of causes that were associated with that. Sort of people who were into animal rights were very present at those shows. Amnesty International was really present at those shows, and when I learned more about the death penalty, I became really personally enraged about what we were doing. And so I remember writing 100 letters to every single senator about the death penalty and sending those off with that little word processor. So it took me a long time.
That's impressive.
My parents were like, "What is she doing up there?" Yeah. But yeah, that was when I realized that, that not every structure. That was partly when I realized that the what I was learning about not every social structure being in my favor or in everyone's favor, that it wasn't benevolent all the time, but that I could do something about it. Yeah, I mean, another thing to say just about how I grew up is that, you said I lived everywhere. I didn't live, and many military kids lived outside the US for at least some part of their time. And my dad never wanted to do that.
Okay.
He changed his, he made a lot of, I think, potential sacrifices, but also decisions about what he would and would not do, because he married a white woman, my mother, and he had mixed race kids, and he felt very strongly about where we should live as a result of that. And there were certain countries that test pilots often got stationed to, that he did not want us to go to. And so, partly where I lived was, because he had to change jobs at that point, but also because because he had made all these decisions about how he wanted his family to be treated or not treated. And so part of how I got interested in race is that, and racism is my own experience as a child. And I don't think this is particularly, unique, but I'll say it anyway, which is that a lot of my classmates could not understand how the person who I identified as my mother was my mother. Like, it just did not compute. And that was one experience. So I had to do a lot of explaining. Yeah. Like a very young age, I had to do a lot of explaining about that.
Yes.
So there were these rigid lines, that
absolutely
had to be explained. And then both my mother's family and my father's family did not want them to marry each other. And things softened up a little bit when my brother and I were born, but there was a lot of distance between us. So we were really very, and all that moving around, right? We were very tight family. And so all of the experiences that many of my friends had of staying in the same place and having kids who they knew in kindergarten, but also having family around with those traditions that they learned, and having that kind of mooring in that cultural background that is their family, and both of them having been rejected by those families and seeking something with each other that was new was kind of my experience growing up.
Oh my gosh, you have touched on so many things. I just I just want to dive deeper. You
It has nothing to do with neuropsychology yet.
I
That's it.
know, but you know what? That's not even really the point of this.
Okay.
I'm
I love it.
so
Yeah, let's go there.
Yeah, I know. I'm so intrigued. So you mentioned how growing up as someone who was biracial, and in this family or familial dynamic where there was a lot of tension. Um, can you tell us more about how, growing up in this household and grow in, the experiences that you had as a child and someone who was biracial, and how that continues to like influence the incredible work that you do across, these different communities, but particularly in the Black community. How has that informed your work?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's probably, I mean, I have me and my therapist talked about that just a little bit. But no, I probably still haven't processed it fully.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at this point, the where we're ending up now
Mm-hmm.
is that there's nothing more important to me than giving Black and brown people who want to be in this field and who want to be in science, um, that welcoming that welcoming place where they can be. Um, and I think that I was frequently the only something in the room.
Yes.
And that was true in my classes, in high school. That was true to some extent, in the labs that I worked in college, and it was definitely true in grad school, like throughout. So, I think that experience, it affects everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't until I started, digging down into the work in grad school that I realized that I could bring those experiences to my work.
Yes.
And I remember a story that my dad told me. I don't know if I have said this to people before in neuropsychology, but he grew up in Kentucky, and when he went to college early. He went to college at the age of 15, and he was in a class. I remember it as being a math class. He ended up being an aeronautical training as an aeronautical engineer, and as I said, a test pilot. But he said that in this class he would raise his hand and he would answer questions, and the teacher in the class, who was white, would say to him, called him aside after class one day and said, "I think that what you have to say is really important, but I don't understand what you're saying." Because my dad spoke like every other child in his neighborhood. He spoke African American, vernacular English. He spoke Black English.
Yeah.
And what my dad told me was that he went back to that affected him so strongly. He went back to his home. He lived with his parents when he went to college. He went back to his home and he listened to the radio announcers, and he tried to imitate them. And he practiced that. And he took it out. And so that because he really wanted to be included in that world, in that academic, world. And, when I started learning about acculturation in graduate school, it clicked for me.
Yep.
And that was what my dissertation was on. And it was Wally Miller, who you said this lecture is named after, or this seminar is named after. It was Wally Miller who made that possible, and it was Igor Grant and Bob Heaton who made that possible, because of the work that they were doing. I don't know if you want to get into that, but I forget what question you asked me. I just went totally.
No,
yeah.
I was asking you about how your identity, someone was biracial, and how that impacted and influenced you. And you answered it. I got chills as you were talking, because I think a lot of people, whether you identify as Black, Latinx, you can have that experience of being the only something in the room, and having that experience as feeling as other. And you so beautifully highlighted how not only your experiences, but the experiences of your father and your family, and how even his experiences have impacted you in some way because of how they impacted him. And so thank you so much for being so authentic and bringing that into this space, because I think we need that, because we do bring our experiences into our work, and it's imperative that we do.
Yes. Actually, let me just say, that is the point. That is the point. Thank you. It is the point that there's so much value in bringing your own experiences to this field. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was also bringing it to research and bringing it to the science of this field. It has value. Mm-hmm. And so I don't want anyone who's listening to ever be afraid anymore to bring their full selves to this field. And we talked a lot about that. Was it last week? No, week before last at INS, right? Because there was a lot of talk about this issue, and I don't know if you want to get into that more, but that's the most important, I think, takeaway. So thank you. Of that is to always bring your full experience to your learning, your training, and to your questions and to your passion about the field.
Absolutely. Thank you for modeling that for us, because I do think, because of the competitive nature of the field, sometimes people don't feel like they can be their authentic selves. And so to see you model that for us, I think is amazing. So thank you for that. I did want to follow up with, you talked a little bit about mentorship and what that means to you. And I know last year you were awarded the Paul Satz Award through INS. For those of you who don't know, that's an award bestowed on those in which their mentoring and teaching activities have made a profound impact on the careers of students in neuropsychology. And so can you tell us what that award means to you, and the impact of those mentors you mentioned earlier in your personal and professional life?
It means everything.
Yeah.
It's the best, the best. I would recommend everyone get that award. It feels so good. It is really the best feeling. Mm-hmm. I think the highest highs that I have had in my career have been around the people that I've worked with, sort of shining, and to be able to kind of recognize that path, and just feeling so proud. I can't, and proud is not even the word. It's just like it's exquisite to see people that you had something to do with throughout their career just go off and do their thing.
Yeah.
And then some of the lowest lows I've had are around mentoring too, really knowing that in some cases there's very little that I could do to help people, to see that sometimes it feels out of reach, and the hardest times to recognize that it was something that and I still do need to work on. Like, I'm far from perfect. I'm far from universally supportive. I have definitely my prickly sides and my demanding sides. And, I look back and some of you may be on this call right now that I have, told that I recognized how I failed in that situation. And there's probably many other situations that I haven't recognized. But I am trying to put myself out there, and I am trying to, I'm open for that feedback. And I want to get that kind of feedback from my mentees because I want to get better at mentoring as well.
Wow, it blows my mind that, someone who's revered, in terms of the mentoring and the dedication you put into mentoring, your students, to say that you're still looking for that feedback, and in even highlighting the kind of the dark side to mentoring, right? In terms of some of the lows you've experienced with that. I'm not gonna lie, Dr. Manley, I think it was one INS, I think it was 2018. And I was attending a seminar, and one of your students was giving a symposium, and to see the look of pride on your face, like you were like, yes, and you were you were like mama bear when someone tried to ask a question that was like totally inappropriate, like nuh-uh, we're not having none of that. So you exude that, and you can really tell by the quality of the work that your students do. Just seeing you in action with them, it's so inspiring. So thank you for giving us a bit of glimpse from your side of both the successes and challenges that come with that. Absolutely. So when I think about your research, I may be simplifying it overwhelmingly, but I think of YCAP.
Okay.
I don't know, but can you tell us how that project got started and just the backstory behind that?
Okay. Yeah, that's really a good question, because it's true that study has defined a lot of what comes after and what I think about. And I was just having meetings with I just like a couple of hours ago was having meetings with Miguel Arce, and we were talking about what a dramatic difference it makes to practice neuropsychology in a study like YCAP, to do neuropsychology in a study like YCAP, versus what most people have experience with is doing neuropsychology only like in a clinic setting, or in a setting where it's quite different from a large epidemiologic study. So YCAP started in 1992 as the study that we know of now, where they sent out they paid the Center for Medicare Services, CMS, for the names and addresses of people who were eligible for Medicare, who lived around the neighborhoods, the census tracts around the hospital. That's the Columbia University Hospital, which is in Washington Heights. And the purpose of that originally was to determine the prevalence of dementia in this community, where there were three large sort of ethnic and racial groups that were residing. First, Latinx people, primarily from the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, and Cuba. Two, non-Latinx white people who were, many of them immigrants from Europe and Eastern Europe. And three, non-Latinx Black people. About 80% of them had been born and raised in the South, mainly North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, and moved up to New York to the Great Migration. So this is like a super interesting neighborhood.
Yes, very diverse.
Yeah, and no one knew. what the prevalence of dementia was in those populations, because no one had designed a study that was both assessing, cognition and function in this older cohort, but also, doing it in this kind of a environment or residential neighborhood that that had so much diversity in that small little space, so so that the original 92 study was a prevalence study. So they really were seeking a representative cohort of people aged 65 years and older in that neighborhood, and they got about 2,200 people who, when you check with the census, the 1990 census, it's overlapping. It's completely overlapping. So, so they got funding. This is Richard Mayu, who's a neurologist at Columbia University. He got funding to recruit a brand new cohort in 1999 as well, with basically the same method. And then in 2009, another 2,000 or so people. So now 6,500 people have been seen at least once and followed up over time. It's become now a study that's interested not just in prevalence, so just how much, who is demented and how prevalent is it, but also incidence. So what are the risk factors for going on to develop dementia among people who were initially normal? And then, it's sprouted out to looking at genetics, and, now we have this social determinants of health aspect of it, and neuroimaging. Adam Brickman does neuroimaging in the cohort, bringing everybody in. One key thing, and I think I probably mention this in every kind of talk that I have, is that that the YCAP study sees people in their homes.
That's amazing.
They have the option to come to the hospital, and many do, and obviously if they're going to do MRI, they have to. But we draw blood in their homes. We can do neuropsych in their homes. We do the medical evaluation. All the interviewers carry a suitcase full of, like a scale and, the blood pressure machine that they use. And so it's portable. We take everything with us.
Yes.
And that is key to getting representative participation, as well as, having partnerships with the people that you are supposed to be studying. Washington Heights is a totally vibrant community that has a lot of where the Dominican population there actually has a lot going on in terms of businesses and political representation, and so there's just a lot of there's a lot there to take into account as a researcher, that those equal partnerships with that group, so that you're not just busting in there and saying, okay, now we're going to study dementia, is a part of that.
That's so funny. I don't know why some researchers still think that they can do that when this project is literally taking years and decades of building these relationships with people. And it really serves as a great model for something. I was just speaking with a colleague before our interview about developing this community neuropsychology, where you actually go into the community and it's boots on the ground, and not something that people have to come to, but that you go to them. And so I loved hearing that backstory. Thank you so much.
I think that's a wonderful sort of terminology, and I think community neuropsychology to me goes hand in hand with cultural neuropsychology. Absolutely. That it just cannot, be separated. Yeah. And so I think the origin of your question was, how has it just like when you think of me, you think of YCAP. It totally shaped how I think about what some of the forces are that determine how we end up with the cognition we have, or what our trajectory is later in life. What are some of the resilience factors? What are some of the things we're missing?
Yeah.
What are some of the methodological challenges that we have? It was there that I first, had a part in testing people who were illiterate or people who had never been to school before, because that is a large number of people in that population. That is the case. And that totally changed the way I thought about testing.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. It's definitely something I've been tooting, screaming to the top of my lungs about developing a framework for community neuropsychology. I totally want to make it a thing. I think it has great promise. But yeah, so you talked about how YCAP really it served as the foundation of really changing your perspective about how neuropsychology and research can be done. But your career has certainly evolved and flourished in many other aspects. Can you tell us about a project that you're working on or worked on that you're really excited about right now?
There are so many, and most of them are really that I'm really excited about. Were ideas, or they were the focus of the work of the early career scholars and postdocs that I'm working with. They have developed questions about intersectionality, and questions about sort of early life social factors that work differently across these different subgroups that we study that we've never sort of dug into before. They have developed questions about bilingualism that are totally exciting, because it's not just about bilingual versus monolingual. It's about different skills, sort of deconstructing that idea of bilingualism. They've developed ideas about how to use kind of, we used to call it the process approach in neuropsychology, right? So looking at the quality of errors or the quality of responses on neuropsych at the item level, rather than looking at total score. But looking at these items across different cultures and languages as being revealing about some of the cognitive processes going on, and taking and leveraging the different diverse cohorts that we work with to be able to understand that better. And also about school quality. I mean, that's kind of where I started, just to round out that discussion about YCAP, is that I would go out into the homes of some of the people during this. I took my dissertation work on acculturation, and at first was trying to apply that at YCAP. And I would go into the homes and administer this acculturation questionnaire. And I didn't know when I first came to New York that most of the Black people that live in New York were not born and raised in New York. I just thought, like, okay, everybody's a New Yorker here.
Yeah.
And, nice to get to know the New Yorkers, but they were from rural areas in South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia. They would tell me what their school was like, that they went to, because the acculturation measure I was giving had some questions about school. And I realized then that education, or what we were using in our neuropsych years of school, was totally meaningless as a number, as a comparison across these different groups, even within group. And so there was something really rich here, just like I was telling you earlier about the sort of deconstruction of bilingualism. I was thinking, let's deconstruct education, and let's deconstruct really what we mean by race. So anyway, another one of the scholars that I'm working with is asking these really cool questions about, well, what is it about school, not just school quality, but maybe about your peers, or about what is taught in school that affects your later life cognition, and whether that differs across across different racial and ethnic and sex gender groups. So
that is very interesting.
Yeah, you need a special cohort to do that. So YCAP, as I said, they started when they were Medicare eligible, so at age 65. But now some of the other cohorts that we are working with are people who were first in a research study when they were in high school. And they were in that research study because the Department of Education, not the NIH, funded a study on, what are our kids learning in school, and what are some of the predictors of job success among kids who are now going to high school. So those education department studies, we are, I've been a part of leveraging those participants who number in the hundreds of thousands, now that they are older, in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, to find them again, to match them with the data that was collected all those years ago. And to be able to answer those questions about peer effects, about classes, about teacher qualifications, what was the school like, and what did it offer to students, and whether that has, what kind of relationship that has to the cognitive outcomes.
Wow, that is fantastic. I mean, the future of neuropsychology is looking very bright. With your scholars, they're thinking outside of the box, and looking at some of these factors that I don't think even 10 or 15 years ago would have been considered as things that can impact cognition, or, looked at in such great depth, and viewing how those impact cognition. Dr. Manley, I could speak to you all day about these things and about these factors. I just have one last question, and then we'll open it up to our viewers so they can ask you. We can have that one-on-one time with our viewers. But as we've talked about, you have been wildly successful in our career, in our field, and especially with your research. How do you integrate that success that you've had in your career with those different roles that you may have, with your family, a sister, daughter, mom? How do you manage and integrate all those different aspects of yourself?
I don't really. No, I don't. I don't think I do really. I just, like, my kids do not care at all what I do. They do not, talk to me. I guess they know that I study the brain. And I don't know that they. I think so. I bring. I don't really bring my work home with them. I mean, now it's kind of hard. Like, we're in our home, but they're like, "Mom, are you on a call?" Yeah. So
that's so unbothered. They're like, they don't.
Yeah. I mean, I'm out there taking them sledding, and we'll have one kid who's in college, wants money. I have to give money to my college age kid. I mean, I'm just a regular mom, and then as I suppose that as my dad gets older, my mom passed away, but as my dad gets older, maybe I'm a little bit more savvy about his cognitive function, asking him about that kind of stuff, and talking to him about that sort of thing. But yeah, it's not that integrated. The one thing that I have managed to do is make some really good friends in our field. And part of it is that I've been in this for a really long time. But part of it is that I've had the opportunity to go to INS, both the mid-year and the North America meeting, a lot. And I try to make it there. And also I was on the board of INS, so I would go to these meetings to participate in that. And that created some friendships that are so special to me. And what we tend to do is we'll go to the mid-year meeting and then afterwards plan a trip. And back before my oldest was in college, it was something that we all went to. So we've been we did a 3-day kayaking adventure, a camping adventure in Norway along a fjord. We went to caving in New Zealand. I mean, just think about all the places that INS mid-year have been. We walked in Cornwall from town to town when we were in London. There have been some amazing adventures with me and these friends and my kids. And I'm really looking forward to having those again, because we've missed out on all this travel, right? So yeah, I guess that's the other thing, is that if you have that opportunity, travel, make travel, sort of a part of that identity. And that way your family can potentially take part in that, at least, when school is out in the summer.
Yeah, that is such a great tip that I know but as I'm a new mom, so I have a 1-year-old, and thinking about how to integrate those things into the conferences. I know we're not traveling now, but I'm so glad you mentioned that, because it's not just about the conference. It is not just about, these symposiums. That's important, but being really able to establish these meaningful connections with colleagues and friendships, and being able to bring your kids along and family to experience these wonderful places that we go. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I don't want to trivialize it. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. And, I think we should also demand of our societies that childcare needs get a little bit more integrated into being able to attend. I see a comment from, I know. There have been so many interesting adventures on those trips. So
awesome. Well, I do want to open it up to our viewers today. If you have any questions for Dr. Manley, please go ahead and post them in the chat. I will bring them up on the screen for everyone to see, and for Dr. Manley to see. See if we have any questions in our audience today.
It seems like there might be just a little bit of a delay too.
Oh, okay.
Do you think that's what's going on? Because I'm seeing some comments that are a little bit sort of 5 minutes ago.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. It might be a bit of a delay.
It might be. But I hope people ask questions.
Yeah, I think they will. I'm sure they will. I'm sure they have plenty of questions for you. But if there's a bit of a delay while they're submitting their questions and before I see them here.
Yeah.
So what do you hope to see, or what do you think your ideal vision is when it comes to individuals in the Black community in neuropsychology and public policy? What would be
ask me that one more time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ask me that one more. So clarify that.
Yeah. So in terms of what do you hope neuropsychology, or what more can neuropsychology be doing in the Black community?
Oh, yeah. Gosh. Okay. That's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge. The first thing is, does the Black community, know what neuropsychology is? We have not introduced ourselves.
Yeah.
At all. And we haven't sought any, I think, meaningful partnership outside of outside of research studies
Mm-hmm.
that are doing that. I think that, you know, I think that the Society for Black Neuropsychology is a really good start for this, right? Which is, you know, getting involved in advocacy on many levels, but also just sort of, you know, serving as a resource. I cannot tell you how many people have called my office or emailed me because they have Googled like Black neuropsychologist,
Mm-hmm.
and somehow I come up on that list, even though they're asking me about a kid and I don't do kids, or you know, some other issue. So thank you, you know, Society for Black Neuropsychology for actually, you know, answering that call
Mm-hmm.
and having the bravery, despite, you know, I think formidable letdowns,
Mm-hmm.
and also, you know, maybe a lack of welcoming to this space that you're there because there's an absolute need.
Yeah.
And now the next step is to really partner, partner and engage in a meaningful, real way
Yeah.
with the people who are with the people who you're trying to get to know.
Yeah.
You know, I think that that can't have an agenda of like, okay, we're going to teach you what neuropsychology is.
Right.
It's kind of like let's have a can we learn from you about brain health?
Yeah.
And I think that would be a really good start.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'd love to hear more about, you know, how you believe that we could implement this at a later time. But we have several questions.
Oh, you do? I can't see them. Okay, good.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So we have several.
No, I don't need to see them. You can just tell me.
Okay.
Oh, here's one.
Yeah. What advice do you have for early career scientists who feel lost and don't feel like they cut it in the path they envision?
Yeah, I think that first of all, let's just acknowledge that a lot of people are told either explicitly or implicitly that they don't cut it, that they're not going to cut it. And that's one of the most devastating things that, you know, I feel like, you know, a mentor can hear about their mentees is how many times someone somewhere has implied or explicit or implicit. I mean, we talked about micro invalidations,
Yes.
and that is prevalent in this place. You know, either if it's about statistics, if it's about, you know, if it's about having a head for research design or whatever it is. You know, I think that there's a lot of people who feel invalidated. You know, I understand about imposter syndrome, but I think maybe we should just maybe we need to break that down a little bit. I really like my colleague Whitney Robinson did this whole post on Twitter about imposter syndrome and how she was just want to break it down a little bit. Some of it is because people are always undervalued, you know,
Yes.
and I think that's a way to think about it. Like if you know, don't undervalue yourself. There are lots of people who are going to undervalue you. Yeah, and I mean the thing about that is find a group of people who can support you and who know what's going on. I mean, I have a group of women that I used to talk to every week. Now we just can't seem to make it happen. We make it happen every month or so, but I need that so badly. And they know what I'm going through because they're in the same field. I talk to them about everything. So find your support. It's a sister circle for me. Find your support group and go back to them. Talk to them openly about what's going on and how you're feeling. and make sure that those people are supporting you. You know, you won't, like, I think, don't feel based on what you know, other people are saying, that they know what your potential is, and that's all that matters. That's all that matters. So yeah, I don't know.
Yes.
That's tough, and I know it's going on so much. Like I said, um, I said in my plenary at the end, like, admit Black and brown students and get them in the programs. And then I got a lot of feedback about, like, okay, well, admit them into a place that's then gonna commit all these invalidations, and that's going to make people feel, you know, that they don't belong, and is not going to provide the support that students need, and it's not going to sort of listen to, like, it's going to expect these people to act and behave and to fit and all that. Yeah, that's a dangerous suggestion. It is, and I totally recognize that part. We need to, as a group of people who are in now beyond training, to find ways to support those students. And so I'm very much an advocate of uniting through some of the you know, affinity groups, and it's more than that, advocacy groups that have come up around neuropsychology, wherever it fits you. You know, you can make your own group if that's what it takes.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for bringing light to that situation. I know a lot of people needed to hear that in terms of reframing that, in terms of the imposter syndrome versus, you know, don't devalue yourself. So thank you for that. Our next question, Dr. Manley, do you have concrete suggestions that don't necessarily require larger institutional support to help clinicians conduct better evaluations of patients with low quality education?
Okay. So I'm going to assume that this patient has gotten to you. Okay, so they have gotten to they've gotten through the first step, which is through the door, and now they're seeing a neuropsychologist. That's amazing. First of all, it took a lot. It took a lot. We don't have the kind of normative information that we need to be able to sort of, you know, have a lot of information about what to expect in terms of cognitive test performance. One thing I can say, and this is in papers that you can read, is that even in people who have no formal education, the saving scores on wordless learning tasks are intact if the person does not have you know, a neurodegenerative condition when they're older. So this is just older people, but I think memory is an important cognitive domain. People who have low quality of education can do tasks very well, like animal fluency, and so there are some tasks that really have less of a you know, this load of whatever, you know, the educational piece is than others. The other part is just, I mean, I should have said this first, which is ask about their educational experience. So where did they go to school? You can ask the name of the school. You can look that up. You can look at the investment that the counties and the states put into schools at that time. You can ask them about the racial and ethnic makeup of the school. Schools where Black children are the students are less well invested in than schools where white children are the majority of the students. And so, you know, you can sort of ask about those educational settings. You know, among older adults, we often ask, was it a one-room school, or what, did every school have its own room? That's also very much an issue, you know, for people who grew up in rural settings in any country. You can ask about what were the classes that were offered. what kind of facilities were available in the school. And then if they know anything, if you can find out more information about the school, you can look up things like the proportion of people who were dropouts and stuff like that. Those are always very revealing about the school quality. So in that case, when you're seeing a disconnect, this person may have graduated from high school, and yet their reading level is at a 5th grade level. If you know more about their school quality, then you kind of are getting a sense of how strongly those high school graduate norms should apply to this person. And it's extremely important to think about some of those tests that are resilient to that educational piece and still are giving you a real sense of where the person is at, versus those tests that are not going to be at all as you expect, given their background.
Yeah, thank you.
That was the answer was too long.
No, it's not. People were taking notes because you were dropping knowledge.
Yeah, she got my slides.
I just want to be respectful of your time.
No. If there's more questions,
maybe about 5 or 10 more minutes.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, awesome. So this is from Annie Reyes. What is advice that you could provide to trainees transitioning into early career?
Okay. All right. What advice that I could provide to trainees transitioning into early career? Well, that's a little bit vague, Dr. Reyes. I mean, what kind of career? I mean, I know what kind of career Annie Reyes may want, but I mean, I think it really depends. And maybe that's the best advice I can give, which is, can you sit down and with a mentor and kind of go through what it is you want to accomplish in the next 5 years?
She's research.
Okay. All right. So research, get funding.
Period.
There are a lot of opportunities right now to support early career scholars. You need to find a place where you're going to go. Okay, so Annie, you shouldn't be going to a university where you're the only person who has grant funding. You should go to a place where there's a lot of grant funding happening, because that kind of environment is one that's going to be supportive of all the ups and downs of a research career. So look around for somewhere where there's just a lot of activity and a lot of funding happening. That would be my advice to someone who wants to just go into research. Now, that doesn't mean that you can only go to this, elite group of 5 places. You can, hopefully those places have ongoing partnerships that make the kind of research that you want to do possible in the communities that you want to do. A lot of early career people who are in neuropsychology, who are Black and brown, they are being told that when they come to a certain position, they'll be, put on the diversity committee, and then they can help recruit from the Black and brown community to come into existing studies. No. I would recommend against that. A place that's telling you that you're going to be in charge of outreach as an early career person is probably not the right place to go. That I feel very strongly about. In terms of getting your Ph.D. and getting training, we shouldn't have to put up with some of the invalidations and some of the sort of alienation that we feel while we're going through that. But sometimes we have to, or we're there, and now we have to find support for ourselves in going through it. But in terms of choosing where you're going to be a faculty and finding out what they can do for you as a new faculty member, I feel very strongly that compromise in that respect about, okay, well, I can go here, but then they're not really seeing any Black people in the clinic, even though it's in the middle of a city that's majority Black.
Yeah.
I mean, I talk to a lot of people who are like that, and who are like, considering those kind of jobs. And that does not sound like a good place for an early career person to me, who's interested in diversity. I'm just thinking about Annie as I talk about this. I'm not thinking about anybody else.
Yeah, look at that personalized advice. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Annie knows where she should go.
Yeah. Okay, and to spend some time, we'll do two more questions,
Okay.
and we'll wrap it up. So Jeremy Grant, what recommendations do you have for getting started with community-based neuropsychological research, particularly in institutions that tend to favor traditional research settings?
Traditional research settings, yeah. Where they're like, what? You're going to go to people's homes and test it in their homes or in a community center? When we do research, it's here in the clinic. Yeah.
In the medical center, that's where we do research. Yeah.
Yes. They're not correct about that, and you can educate them. So if you want to have someone, come and talk to them about all the opportunities of doing the research differently, then it's not just me. There's a ton of people who are doing cognitive assessment in this sort of community-based way. And it's getting a lot of attention right now from funding institutions because it's yielding the kind of research that's actually, able to address the questions that people have and the needs that people have to answer questions about health equity and brain health equity. So I would, that's such a good question, Jeremy, because I think, in a way you're coming up with a business plan, but, in a sense, sort of what if we invest in this area, here's what we're going to come out with. Let me show you an example from, Dr. Lisa Barnes at Rush University. She started the Mars study all by herself. That idea that the generation for that was all by herself. And she built on in terms of a cognitive battery and kind of some questions, she built on something that was already there, but she leveraged all of the, co-investigators there to start that study of African American older adults in Chicago. And, she used the same kind of approach that you're talking about, Jeremy. And so, I mean, I think, I think another strategy to help institutions that tend to favor traditional research settings is to get NIH funding to support your research, because I think that's respected in traditional research settings.
Absolutely.
And so, maybe what we need, as a field, is to think about how in this where we are right now, how we can become more integrated with what's going on at NIH. It doesn't need to be this elite few who get these funds. That the partnerships, among people who are, have a lot of research grants. In the best case scenario, they can share their knowledge with you. They can share their contacts and connections with you, and ideally, there's a structure that will allow more early career people to get started.
Yeah.
So so yeah, and one other like practical thing is that sometimes in your own department, like let's say you're in the Department of Psychiatry or Neurology, they're not doing any community work. If you just go over to another department, like, you know, I don't know, rehab medicine, or if you go to maybe Department of Medicine or OBGYN, they're doing tons of community work. Like maybe they're doing a study on diabetes, or maybe they're doing a study on hypertension, and they're out there in barbershops, and they're out there in, you know, community centers, and they're actually doing it. You can potentially leverage with those studies as opposed to ones just in your own department, which are more traditional. So if there's any community research going on at all in your city, in your, you know, in your area, or at your university, they may not have any interest in brain health yet until you come and talk to them and you're like, wait a minute,
Yes.
you're forgetting about this.
Yes. Yes. Brain health is everything. We just
It's
have
everything. They don't even know yet.
Right. They don't even
know. It's going to change their life.
Yes. Okay. One final question. We are getting great questions, Dr. Manley. But you know, we do have to wrap it up. And Erica, I think, asked a wonderful question.
Great, Erica.
That's a good one. That's a good segue. How would you recommend the future generations of neuropsychologists bridge the gap between the field and the Black community?
Well, we are the Black community. We are the Black community.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think what the problem has been is that the whole structure of this kind of assumes that there's some kind of special, you know, group that's going to go on to this field. Like it needs to be more integrated from day one. You know, I think someone said, where was this? It's really not my idea, but back when I was the chair of Division 40 EMA, the Ethnic Minority Affairs Committee, we would, at INS, which happened at a good time of year, like February, wherever we went, like we went to Cincinnati, went to Baltimore, or whatever, we would find people who were the neuropsychologists in that place. And we would find people who were undergrad instructors in like psychology departments. So we'd go to Cincinnati, we would partner with the universities and community colleges and stuff like that in that area. And we would say, come to the hotel, you don't need to register, come to the hotel, it's not allowed anymore. And, you know, come to this sessions, Division 40 Ethnic Minority Affairs session that was taking place in, you know, while we were all doing INS, we'd have some evening sort of thing with food, and then people from the community would come. We didn't often get a lot of takers for that, but that was an opportunity for undergrads who'd never heard of what neuropsychology is. And we didn't just, you know, go for the, you know, kind of white serving institutions. We went for the minority serving institutions in those environments, in those towns, and would invite them to find out more about neuropsychology.
Yeah.
I think, you know, just kind of going where people are at is what we need to do. And, you know, right now, like, we have so many opportunities for partnership. Like right now, our community is being devastated by COVID.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I think that in talking about recovery and talking about resilience and talking about grief and talking about loss, all of those things, you know, I think that neuropsychologists have a role in that. And so we just, you know, and I know I haven't had a chance to listen to the interview with Tony Stringer, but he's very much, you know, a part of his community, and you know, where he lives, and it's not necessarily as a doctor or as a neuropsychologist. It's just as a human being who's, you know, as a Black man who's part of that community.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just think it's not Erica. It's not, you all on you, that you now have to kind of go and educate everybody about neuropsychology. What I'm saying is that I think we need to make some structural changes about how we think about our field, and how we think about who we're exposing neuropsychology to. It cannot be this elite thing. And so to the extent where we know our own community, then that's how we do it.
Yeah.
That's how we do it. And I think it's different in each group.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you for reminding us that, neuropsychology definitely has a place to be social change agents. And we're not just in this to, research and leave. We can make impactful and meaningful differences in communities. I think that's an excellent place to wrap up. Dr. Manley, it has been such a pleasure getting to know you. I feel like I can talk to you and we could discuss these things forever. Shout out to Dr. Mark Norman, who
Hello.
joined us. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Please don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, visit our website, join us if you like, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can get more notifications about our remaining interviews. Again, it was such a pleasure interviewing Dr. Manley, and I hope you all will join us for our next interview in our series. All right, well, take care, everyone.